Good evening and welcome to The Square. Tonight is a much needed conversation on how institutions in Rwanda can best leverage public relations. This is an issue that we have been talking about for quite a while, and I'm very happy that we have guests here with us tonight, experts on the field in the matter of public relations, who will share with us how we can use public relations to better message when it comes to institutions, to SMEs, to government institutions, as well as corporates. Joining me tonight, I'm very happy to welcome our guests with us, and I'll start with our guests seated right to my right, Madam Sonny Kainamura. Sonny Kainamura is the CEO of Clarity Communications. Thank you for joining us tonight,
Thank
Sonny.
you. Thank you.
Great. Also joining us, as always, is Charles Haber, resident panelist of The Square. Charles, always a pleasure to have you on The Square.
Same here, Dana. How are you?
I'm good.
Good.
Yes. Unfortunately, our other resident panelist, Brenda Namata, is not with us, but she'll be joining us from where she is. She'll be tuning in, from wherever she is. Also joining us, I'm happy to welcome our two other guests coming from Illume Creative Studio. We have the co-founder and creative director. Very happy to welcome Anne Mazimhaka on The Square. Anne, great to have you on the show.
Thank you. It's nice to be here.
Great. Also joining us, we have Herbert Muhire, who is the president of the Public Relations Association of Rwanda. Herbert, great to have you on The Square.
Thank you for hosting us.
Thank you. I know a lot of people have been looking forward to this conversation. We've been seeing a lot of sort of institutional mismanagement when it comes to their communiques or how they relate and engage to the public, especially in this digital world that we're in, on digital spaces. And we're here to just shed light on some of the do's and the don'ts. We're going to look at reputation management, and most importantly, we're going to also examine how to build value for public relations when it comes to how institutions utilize this this service in Rwanda. I am happy to start off the convo, but before we do, we usually have midweek highlights from the Square resident panelists, things that have caught the attention of our resident panelists so far. Charles, I'll start with you. Before we kick off, what would you like to share with us and our viewers?
First of all, it feels a little bit uncomfortable that I'm not wearing Uzi tonight. But
no made in Rwanda for you tonight.
Yes, just no made in Rwanda for me tonight. But Herbert read the memo right, so he'll represent me in that space. But I'm extremely thrilled that life is coming back to normalcy. It's been concerted effort from different agencies, law enforcement, but vigilance from the Rwandan populace, but also equally importantly, initiatives around vaccination and observing SOPs and what have you. But the economy was really hurting. The entertainment sector, the social space, events and what have you was really in deep pain. So it's really fulfilling that you can see as a spin-off of all those efforts in vaccination and doing what we are supposed to do right. Now the economy is coming back to life. But also along those lines, all the efforts that are being put into sports tourism and all the mice, all the investments that have been made around mice can only bear fruit once the ecosystem is working. You don't want all these highly paid NBA-bound sportsmen to come and go without leaving us their thousands of dollars. So it's really exciting.
Yeah. And I know, Charles, there's a time we were talking on The Square and you mentioned, we need to try and get back to normal as soon as possible, and we can do that as other countries are doing, vaccination, asking for a vaccination card at an entrance of a festival. Or a negative test to make it a standardized procedure.
Or a combination of both. Yes.
A combination of both, which is actually happening. So it's good to know that we're getting back to a semblance of normalcy.
Yes, gradually, yes.
So to speak.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm also happy about that.
Yes.
So to our viewers, thank you very much for tuning in. Thank you very much. Like we said earlier on the show, right now we're not live on RBA, but we're live streaming, and this is because of, like Charles mentioned, sports tourism. We're having the the African Volleyball Championships happening in Kigali right now. But yes, we are live on our live stream channel. And I'd like to thank our guests once again, Sonny Kainamura, Anne Mazimhaka, and Herbert Muhire. Great to have you on the show. I'm really looking for this conversation.
I hope Bana doesn't feel threatened.
I know. I just miss her. I'm looking forward to this conversation as a communicator, someone who's been in the industry for the last 2 decades, so to speak. I think to kick off this conversation, we can't do it without really defining what public relations is. Most of the time, it's confused with marketing, it's confused with advertising, it's confused with publicity, what happens for celebrities. And I think if we can just define it, and if you'll allow me to read, public relations really is a strategic communication process that builds mutually beneficial relationships between organizations and their publics, organizations and their audiences. So I'll start with you, Sonny. If you can briefly start by sharing with us the work that Clarity Communication does, the work that your organization does when it comes to building public relations strategies for organizations.
Thank you so much. Diane, it's a pleasure to be on the square. I'm a big fan of this. And my family is at home watching, as usual. So thank you. My name is Sonny Kainamura, and I am the founder and CEO of Clarity Communications. I would say I'm a public relations and communications strategist. Clarity Communications specializes in strategic communications, meetings and events, public relations, as well as executive communications. How did I end up in this career? Well, Clarity was founded in 2009. That's about 13 years ago. And it was created basically to amplify the really exciting and great stories of transformation that is happening in Rwanda. And we do that basically by offering our clients several different services, as I had mentioned before. Public relations, I think, as you rightly defined, it's basically allowing your company or yourself to communicate with the public that's very important to you. And we all know that reputation or how it is that you're perceived in people's minds actually affects the bottom line. There are studies, there are cases globally about how CEOs actually can lose their jobs not because they've not met their financial target, but because of reputation. And so I'm really looking forward to this discussion with our colleagues Anne and Herbert, just to see how we can dive deeper into PR in Rwanda. Thank you.
I like how you said, you have CEOs, you have some leaders who can actually lose their standing, lose their jobs, not because of not hitting their financial targets or the bottom line, but just because of bad mismanagement in how they message or how their brand is carried forward. And I think that's where the value of public relations comes in. I'd like to just go to Anne and Herbert briefly. I'll start with you, Anne. If you could share with us, what Illume Creative Studio does in terms of helping institutions leverage PR, and if you could just briefly tell us also a bit more of what Illume Creative Studio does.
All right, thank you. My name is Anne Mazimhaka, and I'm the co-founder and creative director of Illume Creative Studio. And Illume is a communications agency. It was founded 10 years ago. And we focus on developing communication strategies and on creating content. We create content through photography, video production, graphic design, and copywriting, and we market content through PR and social media marketing. And in terms of how we work with our clients, we work closely with our clients basically to develop strategies that help them develop a strong relationship with their audiences. Because at the heart of PR is the need for organizations, institutions, private companies to establish a relationship of trust with their audiences. And so we do that relying heavily on creating really good content and strong storytelling so that we can connect authentically with audiences. So that, in summary, is what Illume does.
Thank you very much. Herbert, you're here as the president of the Public Relations Association of Rwanda. I know you've been head of public relations communications in different institutions, over the last 15, 20 years. If you could share with us, why and how did you start PRAR, so to speak, the Public Relations Agency in Rwanda? How did it come about? How is it doing so far?
Thank you, Dan. The Public Relations Association of Rwanda was actually launched in 2008, but unfortunately it has not been very active, partly because of the nature of business in our institutions, as well as the public relations career, which is what we're going to talk about, has not been taken up and given its due value. So the founders, thought that we needed to have an association where we can have a peer-to-peer learning platform, a platform where we can share experience, share knowledge, but also, most importantly, to have an association, just like other professional careers, that can shape professional standards for the public relations practice. So, like I said, we've not been very active, and of late, the pandemic also made it worse. But going forward, as a committee, we've been looking for ways of reviving activity with all the PR practitioners in the private sector, in the public sector, basically from all sectors, so that we can revive and start practicing the way we are supposed to. We have a code of ethics, and so that we can start sharing and get to know and use public relations the way it is supposed to be in an institution.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I'll definitely be getting back as to why it's not that active. You know, what are some of the gaps? What has hindered you from becoming active and that sort of thing? Charles, I'd really like to hear your thoughts on what some of our guests have said before we kick off into the part, the meat of this discussion, reputation and crisis management.
I obviously, because it's a 1 hour show, so you usually want sort of to dive in as soon as you can. Yeah. And I'll take it on from what Herbert just concluded on.
Yeah.
And the fact why the profession or the practice has not been as active as it should be. I think one of the biggest issues that I've never gotten my heads around is that Rwanda is so big on PR, and it's extremely, as a country, yes. And it's extremely important that our image is portrayed correctly, yet the individuals who run the PR function in different institutions, private and public, are not given as much weight. And I'll just give a few examples. It is very common that somebody who is in charge of PR in an institution is part of his job description is to ensure that the minister or the DG has newspapers to read and to deliver on a frequent basis, or to ensure that subscription to the East African and the GA, and well, GA is not in print, but all the other Jeune Afriques and what have you are renewed on time, or to handle protocol matters and what have you. But even take it a notch higher, and so if you take out the army and the police, and of recent prison services, so security services in general, you find that all the other institutions, communication is solely the responsibility of the minister or the director general or the head of that institution. So that really boils down to tell you that the weight they give to that function is not as important. So to Herbert's point, I think those are some of the major fundamental issues that they're facing, and I think he was shy enough not to mention that I was one of the founders of the Public Relations Association of Rwanda.
Nice.
And
I was going to mention
at the time, those are some of the things that the founder members set out to change, but I ran away as soon as I realized it was not about to happen.
Yeah. No, for sure. What you're saying is absolutely true. I think the PR, you know, we really invest in the brand Rwanda. You know, we're really conscious about our image. We really invest in it. You know, telling our stories. But I think institutions also need to empower the people in charge, whether it's a department, whether it's a PR agency, to be able to also tell these stories, give it the same weight on a sort of micro level. And I want to talk about, the reason we also, when we put this show together, we were looking at just a series of events that were happening, especially in the social media space, where you had, communiques from institutions, or you had, just engagement with the public online, and it was really not in the best manner. In the best professional manner. And we thought to ourselves, surely there must be some sort of PR advisory, some sort of comms communication advisory here. And here I want to talk about reputation management, crisis management, and what we've seen within our institutional network when it comes to communicating and PR. They're more reactionary, it's more reactive than proactive. People respond other than trying to stay ahead of the messaging or staying ahead of the crisis or whatever is happening. So my question to you, and I'll kick off with you once again, Sonny, is, there's still a glaring lack of PR management. And if you could share with us, what are some of the do's and what are some of the don'ts when it comes to the PR that focuses on reputation and crisis management for its institutions, especially within the digital context? I think COVID-19 has kind of pushed us into sort of more digital, and news happens really fast. So what are some of the do's and don'ts when it comes to PR for institutions in Rwanda?
Thank you. Maybe I would just, and Anne and Herbert can chip in as well. I think it's important to see that public relations or communications is a strategic, it's part of a strategic function. And oftentimes when we react, I guess the question is, what are you reacting to? Are you reacting to a Twitter storm that has come up? Are you reacting to a newspaper headline? And I think when you react to what you're reading in the newspapers or online, you're going to miss the whole big picture. The big picture really is that reputation is about what people think about your brand in their minds, right? So if your reputation is dented, it's going to mean that I'm less willing to buy your product, I'm less willing to engage with you, I might not want to work for you. But if you're doing it right, you want to ensure that strategically you're communicating in a way that people are willing to engage with your brand. So going down to the do's and don'ts, I would say overall, I think the focus should be on planning. There's pre-crisis, during the crisis, and after the crisis. The pre-crisis, really the big issue there is you do scenario planning. I know corporations do a lot of scenario planning around risk. And so if you kind of do levels of what the impact on your reputation would be. And you develop messages around that. So when that crisis comes, or something similar to that crisis, you're not caught flat-footed. The second thing as well is, during the crisis, it's pick the platform you're going to use. Don't just use Twitter, or that's just one avenue that's going to influence people who engage with you. But you need to think about, the bigger story, So if there's a reputational issue, to one person, it might not be a big issue, depending on what they're looking at. To another one, it's a huge issue. And so I think we need to take a holistic view.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'd like to go to Anne and Herbert, the do's and don'ts. Some people have been accused, or institutions have been accused of coming off across as quite defensive, not informative, brushing off some of these issues. And what are some of in your experience, especially on digital platforms, what tips can you share, in your capacity as creative director and co-founder of Illum Creative Studio, when it comes to reputation and crisis management for institutions in Rwanda?
Thank you. I think Sonny was absolutely right that we need to realize that PR is very strategic, and it needs to be incorporated into any company, organization, institution's overall strategy from the beginning. So in terms of some of the do's, do listen. I think listening is key. Because we work largely online and manage brands online, Social listening is a big part of what we do and a big part of what every organization should incorporate into their PR. Listen to your audience, listen to what they care about, listen to the conversations that they're having, look at what upsets them, what brings them joy, what gives them satisfaction, what they're willing to engage with. And that will sort of, to connect to what Soni was saying, it will show you what the different stakeholders in your audience care about. And that sort of helps you anticipate how to react in case there is some sort of a crisis. And then secondly, in terms of what to do, be consistent and authentic in your messaging. Have a communication strategy that allows you to consistently interact with your audience, really develop those public relations, as it were, and develop those relationships and be authentic about it. Stay true to your brand story and your brand messaging, and be very authentic with how you communicate with the audience. So I think how some institutions kind of lose their way in terms of public relations is they might not know what their own story is necessarily. You know, you're part of a bigger ecosystem. You're part of institutions in Rwanda, yes, and we know what their Rwanda brand is. That's very strong. But I think each institution needs to have its own brand and its own messaging and know exactly how it's interacting with its audiences. And then thirdly, in terms of what to do, which is exactly ties into what Soni was saying, is to develop a brand reputation strategy as part of your communication strategy. And a lot of people don't know where to begin with that, and it sounds like a lot of words, but hiring an expert that knows how to do this, or if you have somebody internally, an internal staff expert who can do this, it's really, again, it incorporates the listening, but it also builds, helps you create scenarios that you can react to, like Soni said, and it helps you get ahead of things and anticipate things, and then it does indeed make you less reactionary and far more proactive. And then I think just finally in terms of don'ts, one thing is not to panic when there's a bad review or a Twitter storm. These things happen, so instead of panicking and being severely reactionary, just think more about listening to your audience and how to actually communicate with them. And then finally, don't underestimate your audience. I think we go wrong when we underestimate the audience. And before the pandemic, even over the last 10 years, so many people are on social media. Each person with a smartphone and an internet connection is now a content creator that can break news. So by the time you've finished crafting your press release and have it approved, someone's tweet has already gone viral. So you can't underestimate the power of the citizen journalists, the power of people who really care about what's going on around them. So it's very key not to underestimate the audience.
I really like that point about not underestimating audiences. Herbert, your experience, what tips can you share? What are some of the things you've examined and you would advise people who are listening, institutions or people in charge of communication and PR in these institutions, some of the things you've seen in the Rwandan communication space in your experience as someone who's worked in this field, as well as the president of the Association of PR. What are some things you've witnessed, and what tips do you have so that these occurrences don't happen again?
Thank you. First of all, allow me to start by first giving credit where it's due. I would like to reiterate that Charles Haber was one of the founders of the PR Association in Rwanda. Even today I was checking the photo of the launch, and he was right there somewhere in the group when they took the official photo. So thank you, Charles.
You make me feel like an important person.
Back to your question, Diana. For the last 2 decades, like you said, in my experience, I've learned that public relations is a discipline that looks after reputation. Basically, public relations is about storytelling. Today, people like Charles and the rest of you commented on it. Sadly, public relations has been equated to events management, to customer care, to some even, serving tea to guests and water and protocol, like Charles said. But public relations is a very, very important aspect in an institution. And like you said, that up to today, we really need to empower it. We really need to give the voice to both the PR office in any institution. We need to go back even to the roots and start with the quality of the education that is being given in schools of mass communication. In Rwanda, we have 5 universities that have this department. But we should look at the kind of curriculum, the kind of content that is being given, so that the students that will come out, the output comes out when they know really what to do, especially in times of crisis, in terms of reputation. Also, I would like to say, how you tell the story of an institution is how you'll be perceived out in the audience. So it's very important that you know what you're going to promise is what you'll deliver. What is your vision, mission, the mandate of the institution? How are you going to talk to your audience? And even after having a long-term plan, like Sonny said, good practice of PR needs long-term planning, whereas bad practice focuses on short-term goals. But when you have a long-term plan, create scenarios, even dummy, allow me to call them dummy scenarios of crisis, act them out and say, if we do this, how shall we respond? How shall we react? So in your long term, also have a very, very important aspect whereby you need to learn how to measure. So it is said that if you can't measure it, you can't control it. So we really need to learn, as of today, institutions need to learn today how to measure their reputation, their brand health. And there are very many agencies, we have already 2 represented here, who can conduct these brand index surveys, brand health. How am I standing in the market? What is my market value? So like you said in the do's and don'ts, everyone has commented on that, and I would just like to add that know how to measure it, know how you respond, do not firefight, do not firefight. We like calling it firefighting. Be proactive, like you said, Diana.
Thank you very much, Robert. Charles, I know you have a lot to say.
No, I just wanted to give a real life example of what Herbert has just referred to, around the importance of investing in your brand and how the efforts that you put in your brand will come to save you on a rainy day. There's a big food brand in East Africa that has been knocking on the doors of Rwanda for a while. They're big in the other cities in Kenya and Uganda. And recently, somebody posted a picture of a mouse in their juice.
Really? Was it a Photoshop? In this day and age, you have to ask yourself,
Probably not.
Yeah.
But guess who came to their rescue? It is their clientele. They had built so much of a loyal customer base over a long time that people did not care whether frogs were breeding in their takeaway cups and what have you. But they were so good with their brand and and not really their communication, but their product. Their product was amazing. Their brand was fantastic. That people really didn't care. So whether there were tadpoles or whatever, it didn't matter at all. Or there was a short shelf life of the bad story because of the strength of the brand. And I think that really speaks to everybody's story and probably even Rwanda's story, that however tainted we may be, if you look at our telecom industry and the wars that they fight, one of them will spend billions or hundreds of millions on being portrayed as being dragged by being tethered like the one cow per family and how they graze, and they put a color, and the regulatory authority will try to come to their rescue, but it will not stop the tethered from retaining the number 1 position. So I think the point is it's extremely important to invest in your brand because there is long-term gain.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Absolutely. Don't underestimate your brand. Try and keep on looking at your brand health, as our guest panelists have said. I just want to also just dig a bit deeper when it comes to this. Why do you think the challenges exist when it comes to this industry in Rwanda? I mean, you have countries in the region that really understand the importance of storytelling, of public relations, of how businesses and institutions can engage with their publics. Why, if you just dig it a bit deeper, why is it that in Rwanda there's a sort of hurdle when it comes to this? It's always undervalued, it's always undermined. Yet as a country, we understand its importance. But when you just go on a slightly micro level, it's always something that is, sort of flicked to the side. Sonny, why do you think this is?
I don't know if I have the answer.
I know there's no clear answer to this question.
Yeah, but I would say, and I think Herbert alluded to it in terms of, our education and how we're preparing people who can be practitioners in public relations and to give it value. I also wanted to say that training is critical. Training in all spheres of public relations. It's a vast field. And also, I think just breaking the perception that PR is, as Herbert mentioned, or you mentioned, it's just pushing papers around and making sure. But really, PR, there's sports communications, there's entertainment communications, there's financial communications. And if we break sort of the image of what it is that we do in this profession, I think that is one of the barriers that can be removed. But also, we're a young country, really. Our companies, I think, are 10, 11 years old, and I think RDB is also 10, 11, 12 years old. So we're a young country, and we're learning on the go. And one of the things we're doing at Clarity is providing some of that training. We offer training for institutions and their staff. And part of that training is for the PROs in the company. And so that could be developing their skills for speech writing, developing their skills for developing a messaging grid. We also train their teams on media engagement, public speaking, presentations. And I think slowly, at least we are beginning to see that there's great value that's being appreciated for the industry.
For sure.
Yeah.
I say that why some of the hurdles, why do they exist? But I should also say that they've greatly improved over the last couple of years.
Yes.
My company also, we do the same thing. Sonny and Anne, Blue Oceans, it's also involved in this. And for sure, if you're talking about PR in, 2012, 2013, 2014, 2015, it was a totally different story. So for sure, credit where it's due. It's been picked up by our institutional leadership. Anne, over to you. Why do you think some of these challenges exist in Rwanda when it comes to, the craft that is public relations?
I think there's been sort of historically a general misunderstanding of what public relations is. And a lot of that does have to do with the fact that people who are in public relations positions possibly graduated from mass communications or something and did not specialize necessarily in public relations. Oftentimes when you went to school and did mass communications, you wanted to be a journalist. And so there were a lot of people who came out as journalists with a journalist mentality and were put in positions of PR and didn't know where to go from there. And that really greatly informed sort of what the industry was like in the beginning. And like Sonny said, we're really quite young as a country and very young as an industry. But what's incredible to see though is in the last, I think, 5 years, you're seeing more and more people go to, because of the opportunities they've been given, be able to study more specialized communications. So be able to study actually digital communications, to be able to study sports communications, for example, like Sonny said. And so you're seeing the industry shift as more expertise comes into the industry. And that's where it is actually quite crucial for institutions, but also private companies to invest in training their PR people. You need to recognize that sometimes people came out of school not with the necessary current skills, but that doesn't mean that we should give up on them. It's necessary to upskill them, invest in them, put some resources behind them, create teams. Oftentimes you see a very large company with only one person handling all of the PR plus the marketing, and they're doing the content creation, and that's where you sort of fall short. So when you have agencies like ours, like you both mentioned, your agencies do training for PROs within institutions, and also we also train communications professionals in institutions to create content. And I think you can see the development of something there. Because I think people are starting to see the value in the results, but they don't know what goes into it yet. So I think this is a time and I think being part of the beginning of an industry, which everybody here I think has been part of, there's a lot of teaching involved. And I think we can see the beginnings of the impact of people learning to work with agencies, learning from agencies, and learning from experts. So I think we're still at the nascent stages of learning exactly how public relations works, but we are definitely getting somewhere.
Yeah, we are. I like your optimism. I like your optimistic attitude. Herbert, over to you.
Thank you. Just like the others have said, I'll just add, where I've seen challenges coming from, like you said, yes, we're improving in the recent years. However, like I always tell my colleagues, a good PR practitioner has to start with having a very, very good relationship with the media. The media is a very good driver of reputation. They can break you, they can make you. So you have to have a good relationship with them. In the past, I've seen very many practitioners, and we've also had debates around this. PR people and the media, are they enemies or are they allies? So we tend to not understand them. They don't understand us. The media will say, the PR person of that institution, I don't want to talk to them. I just want to talk to the CEO. I just want to talk to the DG. They don't know that you are possibly, you are empowered. You have ownership. You can tell the story of the whole institution. In one area, that is very important. Also, another challenging area has been, as you tell a story, as a PR office in any institution, do you remember to involve all the staff? Because they are the primary ambassadors of your brand. So as we tell the story, we need to also involve all our staff, so that if tomorrow I'm not there, or just down the road, one of the staff members meets a question or someone asking them what is happening in your institution, we've had this and this on Twitter, we've read, we've seen, so what is happening? So a staff should be able to immediately tell the story and in a positive way to maintain the image of the institution. Another challenge that I've seen also is, like Anne said, investment in the PR. We need, most institutions, the PR officers, they are not held in high esteem. So we need to have trust in them. They are the specialists. They know how to communicate. So we really need to invest in them, take them through courses. But also, I will end with this other challenge, which I've seen that when an institution has a financial crisis, the first budget to be cut is the communications budget. And that is a very painful reality. Most communication budgets are cut. They say, no, we don't. And then tomorrow you fall into a crisis when you can't even go to the TV, you can't use an agency. Basically, you can't. So we really need to invest in the communication budget without fear or favor, and let it be highly esteemed. That is still lacking in today's most institutions.
Thank you very much, Herbert. Charles, would you like to weigh in on what our guests have said?
Sort of as part of what Herbert, and Herbert is really not selling his services, unlike all of you, he's more straight to the point. But I think I want to combine three things: governance, political survival, and the strength of the media. You really see that all the three are so connected that the head of the institution will want to own the institution because they are poor governance practices and he can get away with it. You will find that quite often the boss of the institution will look down upon the PR function of that institution, even though in the structure of the institution there is somebody who is in charge of PR and on communications, because probably or most likely or most frequently, if anything goes wrong in the institution, it will not be the communications officer or that, but rather he himself, and therefore he wants to take the mantle on his or her own. And I think that is a fundamental problem of Rwanda. that because political responsibility rests entirely on the head of the institution, therefore, they think they should also be in charge of how many reams of paper are going to go out. And that's all that the head of the institution will tweet the position of the institution from his personal Twitter handle, as opposed to that of the institution, and so on and so forth.
So you're saying there's an element
Yes.
of personalization?
Personalization of institutions.
Yes, when it comes to how they communicate, how they engage with the public.
Absolutely. And I earlier on when I was bringing up this point I said that I insinuated that I wish all institutions would emulate army, police, and recently prisons, because of institutional investment in the way they communicate. Therefore, it doesn't matter who is there. There is a very clear channel, and that's why you see even when there is a change of guard, it does not really change the position of the institution. So I think that's one thing that that probably, especially government, needs to get right, because that's one of the areas where we haven't scored too well, in my opinion. But again, back to government. If you look at the amount of money we spend on foreign PR agencies, and I think here on the square we once talked about how we have even found ourselves in bits of spots of bother, because, you know, to what extent really can foreign PR agencies tell your story? Is it because the likes of Sony and Communication Clarity or Clarity Communication are not communicating as clearly as they should be? Is it because the likes of Illum have been reduced to taking wonderful pictures at events? You know, why is it that we are not Rwandanizing our PR, our communications?
That's an interesting question.
Is that probably part of the problem? I think our agencies have this muscle. I can understand if you want to be on Al Jazeera, on all these other forums, but are we saying that we do not have the local capacity to be propelled to that level, or to coach our leaders to be able to communicate as clearly as they should be? So,
but that's a good
a
question.
leap of faith.
That's a good question,
Yes.
and if you'll allow me
Yes.
to just quickly throw a spanner in the works, you're asking, is that the reason? Because, you know, but what if we look inward, do we also have the capacity? Are we really putting ourselves to international standards?
Now,
let me finish my question.
Yes.
Are we just throwing a spanner in the works? You know, playing the devil's advocate, so to speak? Do we also have the capacity that maybe these other international firms have honed over the years? Is it because we're a nascent industry? Is it maybe because we don't have the capacity? That's why, you know, we're not being Rwandanized when it comes to our PR locally. Or is it a bit of both?
That's a very genuine question to ask ourselves. Or do we want our PR to be inward or outward? If we want our PR to be outward, maybe you want to speak to the big London firms. Do you want your PR to be inward? Maybe you want to speak to the safaris of this world. So, or to use the safaris of this world for that matter. But I think, Anne, to speak to your question of capacity, I can't remember whether it was Anne or Herbert who talked about how we have come such a long way in terms of how many institutions are now able to offer these skills, but the products of these institutions end up being ushers in restaurants and what have you. And there's a bit of a mismatch thereof. It's a collective responsibility, in my opinion, just to sound solution oriented. It's a collective responsibility across board. Sony did raise a very pertinent point that we should be a little bit patient to appreciate that we are only a decade old in appreciating this. Whether that patience will last forever, I don't know, but let's reduce the pounds that are flowing outside and increase the local capacity.
On the locals. I would definitely want to hear what, you know, Herbert and Sonny have to say on what you said, Charles. Very pertinent points. I just want us to go to a Twitter feed. and read a couple of tweets that have come in based on the conversation that we're having tonight. Like I said, we're not on RBA Live, but we're on a YouTube live stream, and I'm glad to see that there's some tweets coming in from our viewers. The first tweet, if you can have it on our screens, is from Nasra Bishumba. If you could have that tweet on our screens, states that many great things are being done in these government and private institutions in Rwanda, but their comms teams have no clue how to put information out there, or they're not being given enough confidence by their supervisors to do so. How can we help each other make this happen? Hoping we can have our Twitter on our screen later on. Sorry, we're having a sort of technical issue. But I feel, Charles, that Nasra was really echoing what you said. Can we empower our communicators?
Our very own.
Our very own, to be able to tell stories of our stories, at least starting from a local perspective. Anne and Herbert, I want to go to you. Anne, I'll start with you. Based on what Charles said, briefly, do you have any feedback to what Charles has just shared?
I think in terms of relying on international PR firms when we're dealing on things on a national basis, I think when you listen to your audience, like I was saying, I think it's important also to have experience. And the one thing that we do have to admit is no matter what skills we have or insight, there is, because it is a nascent industry, we don't have years and years of international experience, for example, in national level crisis management, for example. So I know it's quite easy to say, we have the people here, we can do this exact same job, but I do think that it's important to acknowledge that gap. That being said, I do think that it's possible for us to get there, and I do think it's possible for agencies to work with each other. I think we've had great success in the past working with international agencies where they handle the international part of it and we handle the national campaigns, for example. I think that's a great way to work, looking into partnerships, looking into strategic partnerships that allow local agencies to be upskilled and also take advantage of the authentic local knowledge as well. I think there's a gap when you bring in any industry, an international firm that doesn't understand the local context, but it's very easy to bridge that gap if there's a partnership. So I think it's kind of about creatively looking at how to bring in that expertise, but also take advantage of local knowledge and local skills and build up the skills locally as well.
Thank you very much, Anne. Herbert, over to you.
In my opinion, I think it all comes down to what audience you are focusing on, you're targeting. If I want to sell my story to the international audience, I'll definitely go for an international agency. If I want to reach out to our local communities, I'll go with a local agency. But I would advise that all in all, you do a mix. Or if you are to have an international agency, force them to have some local, people in their team. But it doesn't hurt. It doesn't hurt. All we need is to sell our story very well and to invest as much as we can, because I mean, at the end of the day, you're branding yourself, you're branding the country, you're branding your institution. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Herbert. Sonny, you've been seated next to Charles, and I could see when he was talking, you were. There's some instances where I could see you had some responses to what he was saying.
She was about to punch me.
I think Anne and Herbert have addressed his question really well, and I think a mix where you work with local agencies and international agencies is a good way forward. I would like to address, however, the question of training and giving our PROs capacity. I happen to be, or Clarity Communications is a member of the Public Relations and Communications Association. It's a global association that has about 35,000 agencies, professionals all over the world, Middle East, Latin America, and Europe. And part of the membership benefits actually is training. And there is strong training for internal communications teams. And I think I would recommend institutions here to consider joining because then they get access to training that is world class. And I think that would give them the confidence that they're looking for.
Thank you very much. We're coming towards the end of the show, and I just want to give closing remarks on this very important topic. I feel like we should have a couple more sessions on the same topic going forward in the future. But yeah, we've been here talking about the do's and don'ts of reputation and crisis management when it comes to public relations, investing in the industry, as well as looking at how we can also empower communicators, specifically internal comms teams, communication teams in institutions, to do better, and owning our stories, not only as a country, but on a more micro level, institutionally speaking. So closing remarks, I'll just start off with you, Charles, Soni, and then Herbert and Anne. Charles, very briefly.
I don't attend the leadership retreat. I don't know how ministries and all these other institutions work. But one of my biggest disappointments is I was told I was too old to join the army.
Yes,
I was too independent-minded to be in the police, and I was too careful to be in prison services. But I have an admiration for the way those institutions communicate. I don't understand why RBA, GA, and even Moses Kwibanira YouTube channels must only interview ministers and director generals of all the other institutions, with the exception of security organs. I think I need to go to Kigali Public Library to learn why that is the case.
So you feel that all these media houses, RBA, DHA, and what have you, they should be also having interviews?
No. It is not the problem of the media houses.
No, I'm saying they should be having interviews with people who have been empowered on behalf of the institution.
I think
to be
it's
talking,
the problem of the
institutions.
institutions. Yes.
So you're saying the institutions should push forward and try and empower their spokespeople.
They should spend a little bit longer in Gabiro when they go for their leadership retreats.
Okay.
Yes.
Sonny, over to you, closing remarks.
Thank you. I heard a quote today, actually from the PRCA TV channel, about Warren Buffett. He said it can take you 20 years to build a reputation, but 5 hours or less to destroy it. And what that points to is, as an organization, as an institution, we need to invest heavily in managing our reputations. And there's a number of ways to do that. We've addressed it here today. But fundamentally, I would like to put this out there. Look at PR as closely as you look at your numbers when you have that board meeting, because the reputational risk will affect the bottom line. And there's many examples. We have, for example, Volkswagen. A few years ago, they had this emissions gas crisis. And interestingly, the S&P, the Standard & Poor's, looked at the reputational damage from this scandal, and they downgraded Volkswagen down. I think they went from an A- to a BBB+. So in the end, what you say, you need to say it right, do it right, speak to all your audiences, and know that it's going to affect your bottom line. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sonny. Really, really insightful and compelling advice that you've shared. Herbert, over to you.
Thank you. I just want to quickly touch on what Nasra said on Twitter. Indeed, it is true that most PR practitioners in institutions, unfortunately, they have little or no clue of what is supposed to be done. It is very unfortunate to ring up a toll-free line randomly of any institution, and only half are actually active. So we don't know why we have these toll-free lines, and they keep, websites don't have full information. You can't publish a list of the requirements for a certain service. So I believe that as we empower our PR practitioners, our comms officers, another important aspect that I want to close with is that I learned from one of my bosses, from one of the institutions I worked with, about ownership. An institution, all the staff, like I said earlier, have to be able to own what they do, to be able to speak about what they do with passion, not just the PR office. So, and the PR office has to take the lead to train and equip all the staff so that they can be able to speak and represent the institution well and defend it if need be. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Herbert. Anne, over to you, closing remarks.
All right, thank you.
I think I just want to add on to what Herbert has just said. I think it's crucial for any institution or any organization or business to invest in developing a communication strategy that reaches inward and focuses on building communications within within your own organization, because like Herbert said, your employees, your staff, your team are your best ambassadors, and there is no strategic communications without that. And I think it's key to own everything that is attached to your brand, own all your business profiles online if you're a business, and invest in ownership within your organization. And I think that will at least help in terms of starting to build, as far as you can, a good reputation in terms of PR and online.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much to you, Anne. Thank you very much to you, Herbert. It's been a great pleasure listening to you. And I really hope we can take the conversation further, even online. Thank you, Herbert and Anne.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Great. Thank you also to you, Sonny. It's been a pleasure having you on the show. Really appreciate your very insightful words, like the rest of the guest panelists. Keep up with Clarity Communications.
Thank you.
Ilum, keep up the good job that you're doing. And also Herbert is the head of the Public Relations Association of Rwanda. Keep it up. Charles, always a pleasure having you. Very straight to the point comments. Much appreciated as always. So viewers, thank you for viewing in. Have a good night. See you again next week.